Welcome to Inside Coverage, the how and why of everything going on in the NFL. Charles Robinson is on his training camp tour. He joins us. Frank Schwab, I'm Jason Fitz. Let's get right into it. C-Rob, you are gallivanting all over the country. You've been hanging out at some glorious training camp spots. I know this is a wild time of chaos for you. So let's talk a little bit of chaos. Big takeaways. You hit Chargers camp. Mike Williams abruptly retires. What were your thoughts from what you saw around the Chargers?
Yeah, it was interesting. I definitely think that was something that caught them by surprise. Mike Williams was slated to start the season on the PUP list. And basically the first day of practice decides to hang him up. And for the Chargers, when you're there, you could see they're staring at a hole now in their roster at the X receiver position. I think they were definitely going to count on Mike Williams to fill a significant void for Justin Herbert. And now they're staring at Quentin Johnston. They're looking at Ladd McConkey and saying, okay, can we make this up in the aggregate? How far can Ladd McConkey's game grow at this point? I think they're just trying to figure out exactly what they're going to have to do moving forward. They could potentially look at signing a veteran, but I think they want to get a look at their younger players first before they want to, basically start picking guys off the scrap pile. Keenan Allen is out there. There's obviously that familiarity for the Chargers, but I think that's really the first big hurdle that they're looking at. The offensive line, they've got a center and a left guard. They're still trying to sort through what that's going to look like. How healthy will Mekhi Becton be at right guard? When will Najee Harris come back from this injury that was sustained in the offseason with fireworks, which I was told could have been a lot worse than it ultimately was. There's definitely some questions there surrounding the Chargers on offense, and a lot of potential, a lot of ceiling, but the Mike Williams plot twist was certainly something I don't think they expect.
Yeah, I think of it more on a player level than the team level. Like, Mike Williams just had such an unlucky career with injuries and whatnot that it just feels like it should have been much more. Mike Williams at his peak when he was healthy, really, really good. Obviously, was top 10 pick coming out of Clemson and really played up to that level at times, but injuries always got him. I didn't think he had anything left, to be honest. I think the Chargers, it's I don't want to say it's a blessing in disguise, but I think it might end up being, because I think they would have gotten into the season and saw it from Mike Williams exactly what the rest of the NFL saw last year, which was, he just doesn't have a lot left in the tank. I think this Trey Harris, their second round pick now, becomes a huge deal for their season. Really big. Yep. Like, he's got to play up to that, but he's a second round pick. Like, we're to the point with receivers and the depth in all these draft classes where second round picks usually should play pretty well. Ladd McConkey being a great example. I do think we can't forget a year ago, what were we saying about Ladd McConkey? Yeah, he's a good player, great pick, but he's not that durable. If that comes back, he's such a key figure for them now that if he does miss time, if he does go down with injury, they're really in bad shape as far as their receivers go. But I think there's a team that wants to run the ball anyway. I think Omari Hampton is going to run away with that job. I think Najee Harris is going to be dusted pretty soon. So I'm still as high on the Chargers as I was because of the Harbaugh factor. But yeah, there are some questions they have to answer. There's no question about it, Charles.
Well, and what's interesting too, they have this 5th round pick, Keandre Lambert-Smith, who fast as all get out. I mean, the quickness is there. I think all of a sudden they're seeing flashes from him where they're like, could this guy potentially be a bigger contributor than we thought? Oronde Gadsden, the tight end that they drafted in the 5th round, another guy that flashed. Like, when I was there, he looked smooth, looked really good, made an over-the-shoulder catch while I was there. That was just beautiful. So, you can see, though, they're going to move quickly with these young guys. Like, if Trey Harris goes out there, and he flashed while I was there too, definitely had that downfield connection, I think, already with Herbert. If they flash early and they show they're able to contribute, I don't think Jim Harbaugh is going to hold back. I think he's going to push forward with these guys. And, I expect Hampton will get a load on that offense. I don't think I thought really this was going to be a really heavy split carry situation. But, when you talk to people there, it sounds like Hampton looks like he's capable of carrying a heck of a lot, right out of the gate. And the interesting thing about Ladd McConkey too, I'm talking to a few members of, the decision makers in the organization. You talk to coaches, talk to the front office people. And I said, give me I have an all-pro vote, give me a preseason all-pro kind of watch list for your team. Just give me a couple of guys. And obviously Joe Alt was the right tackle, was one of the first people that they mentioned. And I said, don't give me Rashawn Slater. Don't give me like Herbert. Give me some younger guys. And somebody said to me, hey, McConkey has a higher ceiling than you think. Like, he came out of the gate, blew up, had a big first season, but apparently they're like, he's stronger, he's bigger, and not weight-wise. Like, he hasn't gained weight, but it's almost like Puka Nacua from year 1 to year 2 to year 3 with the Rams. You saw him change his body. He just became a really strong, kind of thicker player without gaining a ton of weight. Apparently, McConkey kind of underwent that transformation from year 1 to 2. And I say that, Frank, because you're like, how can this guy hold up, with the volume of offense could go through him? 6 foot, 185, 190 pounds. Can he really hold up? Well, it looks like physically he's already pressing himself to try and make sure he does hold up.
And that's great. And I think the sky is the limit for him. When he was playing at his best last year, some of his best games, I was like, wow, this guy is really good. And as far as all pro goes, it's just a tough ballot because Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase. But
there's a million receivers.
Right, there's a million receivers. We're in a golden age. But yeah, he is very, very good. I will say this. And it's interesting that I know what you mean about split carries with Omari and Najee. I always thought you're going to get into the season and be like, why are we wasting half the carries on Najee Harris? I think a world of Omari and Hampton. You don't draft a guy 20th, 22nd, whatever he went. You don't draft a guy running back that high and then have him split carries with Najee Harris. Yeah. So I think Omari and Hampton's going to win NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year if Genty doesn't. Genty's kind of like he's probably going to win by default. But Hampton, man, I think he's going to have a massive year. Because, Harbaugh wants to run the football. That's what he likes to do. And I think now he's got a bell cow where he's going to say, boy, kid, go out there, 320 carries, 340 carries. What can you handle? And he's been able to do that. He was able to do that in North Carolina, and I don't see why he can't do it in the NFL.
Yeah, and Harmon, by the way, on our fantasy coverage, continues to praise Hampton, too. Go ahead.
Yeah, and one other nugget, too. Trey Harris, so... during the draft, the Philadelphia Eagles talked to the Chargers about potentially moving up. And, the Chargers were really focused on Hampton. They're like, they wanted to see if Hampton made it to them at the 22nd overall pick. They stayed put and they took him. Now, what I was told was that had Hampton not made it there, they definitely would have explored aggressively trading back with the Eagles. And I think Trey Harris might have been in play if they had slid back to that 32nd overall pick. Now, they white-knuckled it and got him at 55 in the second round, but that's what they think of Trey Harris. Like, he would have been in play had they slid back in the first round as sort of their second option if Hampton had come off the table. Instead, they get both of them. So, that definitely tells you, it says something about, I think, how quickly they will be willing to commit snaps and opportunities to those guys, just like they did with McConkey last year. As long as they show they can handle it and pick things up, they'll play and they'll hit the ground running.
That's not the only training camp you've been at, though. You were also at Cowboys camp, which comes with its own whole bag of wild controversy for the Dallas Cowboys because Jerry Jones spoke. Every time Jerry speaks, there's just so much to it, man. And so, Micah Parsons goes on a podcast and makes it clear that, it's complicated negotiating. His camp wanted to get a deal done. Then Jerry comes out, calls him Michael Parsons instead, and calls him by the wrong name, talks about car accidents. Watching the entire press conference, C-Rob, was a car accident. What the hell's going on in Dallas?
Yeah, the way I wrote it was, Jerry, every time he opens these press conferences every year, it's always the same. He comes down this corridor to kind of watch him sort of amble down to long straightaway, and then he has to, take a hard left turn to get to his seat. I'm like, he really took a hard left this year. This was, he sat down and rolled into it, and you're just sitting there, and I feel like every opening press conference, and there's always something. There's always kind of a jaw-wagging moment. But this one was unlike anything I've ever seen. I've never seen the first camp fight you have basically started by your owner. And, he's talking about Micah Parsons and, making it clear, he basically feels like he already negotiated a contract extension directly one-on-one with Micah Parsons. Jerry and Steven both said they hadn't talked to David Mulugeta, Micah Parsons' agent, despite the fact that Micah Parsons said, I want to do this deal through my agent. Mulugeta's a heavy hitter. You don't just blow off this guy. You don't just circumvent him. He is not that dude. There's only 3 or 4 agents where you're like, it's not really the guy you circumvent when you're trying to do a deal. And, I think that's caused part of this problem. At one point, Jerry, and it might have been a slip of the tongue, but he also mispronounced Mulugeta's name. And I'm like, this is, it's just left and right. You're sitting there staring at the situation. He talks about, Micah didn't, he missed games last year. He says he missed 6 games. He didn't miss 6 games. He missed 4. But then he talked about Dak, and he named Dak and said, I signed this guy, to the richest contract in football, and they missed 2/3 of the season. You're like, why are you pulling this guy into this?
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing here? But it just kept going. Next thing you know, he's talking about Trevon Diggs and Terrence Steele, the offensive lineman. They got contract extension.
That was crazy to me. Wow. Like,
he
totally just gave them strays. Like, maybe we should have waited on those guys. Like, whoa.
That was a heavy rhetorical question, where he says, do you think we should have waited on Trevon Diggs and Terrence Steele? And you're like, wow, that's
They're
insane.
still here.
We should have waited. Yeah. And granted, I see the point that he's making. Both have struggled since they signed those contract extensions. And yes, the Cowboys did get ahead of the curve, which is unlike them on both of those deals. I see where he's coming from. You don't do that in a press conference to open the season. There's nothing to gain by a multitude of things that Jerry Jones said about players and not negotiating through David Mulugeta. And we've talked on this show before where I've told you agents lose their minds with big time players when it comes to the Cowboys because they feel like Jerry always tries to negotiate straight with players. And that pisses agents off. And I guarantee you that has been part of this problem here. Maybe they could have had the deal done in March. They didn't get it done in March. And then obviously the TJ Watt contract resets the table again. So that complicates numbers. There just was no reason for Jerry to come out and, take some of these jabs. And, Micah Parsons obviously shows up. He was, on the field. We'll see. This morning was on the field. We'll see, how much he ends up doing through the next, few days of camp. But it was an uncharacteristically odd start, I think, for the Cowboys when it comes to less talk about, hey, this is the year we're winning the Super Bowl. Less talk about, just the grandiose nature that Jerry always brings to the table. And it was very focused on what I feel like is there's a burr in their saddle over some of these players and the money they're making.
Yeah, well, real quick though, what about the opposite? I always said like how do players feel about this? Like you said, like Dak was catching strays, like Trevon Diggs, like off the top rope, Jerry just hits him with the axe handle. Like, why? What are we doing? But it always seems from the outside looking in, like the players are just kind of like, it's just Jerry. He's just kind of nuts. Like, what is that right? Like, it never seems like this goes anywhere. It never seems like guys are walking out of camp or anything. They're just
right.
They kind of shrug their shoulders. Like, what do you expect? You see the guy too. Like, is that true?
I mean, Frank, money always solves the problems. That's
correct.
The thing, right? Like, I mean, it wasn't all rainbows with the CeeDee Lamb negotiation. The Dak Prescott last 2 negotiations through Todd France. I mean, very contentious, at times, especially behind the scenes. I think there was a ton of frustration when it came to the Cowboys, but they opened the pocketbook. That's the thing. And particularly when it comes to the superstars, they always put them, if they're not at the top of the pile, they're real close. And that tends to resolve things. So, to me, the only way this really truly gets nasty is if Micah, they put the pads on and things start to get physical. Micah says, I should probably leave. I should probably not be here right now for this. If I'm not going to be out there in the pads and I'm going to do a hold in, it might as well just be a straight holdout. If that happens, I'm not saying that turn's not possible, but if that happens, then I think this tends to get a little nastier.
How do you think this turns out? I mean, you do think he gets paid, and the follow-up is, do you think he gets paid more than TJ? Because I assume he does, right?
Yeah. I do. I think he gets paid.
Both,
and
I do too.
I think he'll get paid more than TJ. And I think, Jerry will end up saying, hey, he showed up. I want certain leadership qualities. I wanted to see him, some certain things. And to me, this was always going to get done. And Jerry will make it out like it's a media thing. Oh, the media, you guys, I take my time or whatever. And, it ultimately gets done. And, maybe it drags on longer than any of us think, but he did say one curious thing. And because Jerry's philosophical and he often reaches into the past, I don't think anybody really paid attention to it, but he did say it. He talked about the Emmitt Smith negotiation, decades ago, where Emmitt Smith missed the first 2 games of a season. and they won a Super Bowl that year, but he did miss the first 2 games of the season. Famously, Charles Haley put a helmet through the wall after a loss because he was so pissed off that Emmitt Smith wasn't signed. He brought that up, and he kind of said, like, hey, if we miss games and, we end up winning the Super Bowl, then, I'll be happy. For him to even say that, I'm like, is missing games on the table? Like, is this possible?
There's no cause and effect either. The Cowboys didn't win because Emmitt Smith missed 2 games, but whatever. Yeah. But yes, you're right. Like, all of a sudden you're like, if Micah Parsons misses games, ooh, wow. Like that ain't good.
See, Rob, let me take it to another level here quickly, though, because like what I watched was one of the faces of the NFL, struggled to even misspeak or whatever. He struggled to say the very name of the player that he's negotiating with. He had the wrong number of games lost to injury. Like, it just didn't seem like Jerry was particularly sharp. And I'm looking at this thinking, this isn't just about the Cowboys. At some point, Jerry Jones is one of the most vocal people in the entire NFL. Like, how concerned should the league be about whether or not Jerry can still be Jerry Jones at this point?
I think people take it with a grain of salt because Jerry has a lot of these wandering, moments in press conferences or after games or whenever, where you're like, he's sailing without a map. You're like, we don't know what's going on here right now. Like, what is he talking about? Maybe some of the things he's saying don't make sense, or he's going off on tangents. And so I think even now when it happens, you're just kind of like, well, that's Jerry, he, of course, he knows Micah Parsons' name. Maybe he didn't say it right. Okay, he got the number of games missed wrong. But one thing that is interesting about Jerry, and I thought this press conference, he spent a lot of time talking about, because the appearance that he made, the cameo on Landman, got brought up, right? And so he's on Landman. He has this appearance where, and I don't think he was acting, and it's why the performance was so great. I think it was actually Jerry talking about the Cowboys and what it means to him and handing it off to his family and how it's this family run thing. And that's what, gives him this sense of completion, owning the Cowboys and sharing it with his kids. He talked a lot about, he was questioned about Landman, but he talked a lot about working with Steven, quite a bit, working with his family in this press conference. And to me personally, I feel that creeping closer. Like, I feel like at some point there is going to be a succession here, and Stephen Jones and Charlotte are going to take over this team, and Jerry's going to maybe recede a little bit into the background. That said, he was asked if he ever, over the expanse of his career as the general manager for the Cowboys, considered giving it up. And, he said he did, but it was like fractions of a second, and kind of laughed about it. He's not in a hurry to get out of the way. There's no doubt about that. But I do think, and even he put words to this, time is running short for him. And so some of the things that he's doing are motivated by that. And then some of the things that we see when he talks, not 100% sharp on all the details right now. But he is sharp on one point. He said, I signed the checks. And that's as true as ever.
Yeah, there's no doubt he signs the checks. All right.